This meeting of the Haltom City Council is now in order. Did I frighten you? I'm sorry. Invocation and Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Richard Hutchison.
Will you bow your heads with me, please? Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for preserving our city. Thank you for the citizens of Haltom City and the spirit of volunteerism that we've seen over this last week. Father, thank you so much for the love that you've shown and the grace that you've poured out. Father, we lament the loss of life, but we pray that you'll comfort the family of this dear child. Father, we also pray that you would relieve the trials and the pressures and the stress of the folks in Skyline Mobile Home Park. Thank you for blessing this city, Father, and I pray that you'll give its citizens a sense of unity at this time. I pray that you'll give us wisdom and knowledge about where to go from here. And as plans are established, I pray, Father, that you'll see that we're all concerned for one another and that you'll bless that. Give us wisdom tonight in making decisions. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll do the I have announcements by Chuck Barnett, Assistant City Manager.
Mayor, City Council, ladies and gentlemen, the Haltom City Senior Citizen Center will host two special programs next week. On Tuesday, July the 3rd, the center will celebrate Independence Day with a special program scheduled for 11 a.m. And then on Friday, July the 6th, everyone is welcome to the Senior Citizen Center Swap and Shop, which is set to begin at 8 a.m. If you have any questions, please call the center at 817-834-8021 for additional information. We're going to celebrate 4th of July. The annual Quad Cities Family 4th of July, a fireworks spectacular, is scheduled for 9:30 p.m., repeat 9:30 p.m. at dark, near the Old Bedford Stadium in Haltom City and the North Richland Hills Village Center. Those are located on Highway 26. The event is free to everyone. Concessions will be available. City offices will be closed for the July 4th holiday. Residents with Wednesday trash service will not receive a trash pickup. Please do not place your trash at the curb for pickup until your next regularly scheduled day, which in this case will be the following Saturday. On Wednesday, July 11th, the city will host the groundbreaking celebration for the new Haltom City Public Library. This is an exciting event not only for the mayor and the council, but also all of our citizens. The program will begin at 9 a.m. at the construction site, which is located on the west side of Haltom Road at Spring Lake Parkway. For information about any events or the City of Haltom City, please log on to our website at www.haltomcitytx.com. Any questions?
Chuck, again, where the fireworks were going to be at Birdville Stadium?
Yes, sir. What did I say?
Okay.
Did I say Bedford Stadium?
It sounded a lot like Bedford Stadium, but that's okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Just wanted to point that out publicly. I didn't want anybody driving to Bedford to watch the fireworks show. Mr. Hudson, were you piling on? Oh, okay. All right. All right. Next, City Manager Tom Muir is going to give us an update on the recent flooding.
Thank you, Mayor. This is, as everybody knows, we had a flood on June 18th, and We just found out a few minutes ago that a trailer in the mobile home park was struck by lightning within the last few minutes. So we've got crews up there responding to that. So it's just never ends, it seems. It's unfortunate. Governor Perry has issued a declaration of disaster for the area, and that's been forwarded to the White House. That was done last Friday. I'm not aware, at least as of earlier, late this afternoon, that any action has been taken on that declaration. If President Bush does sign that, then FEMA will step in. But until such time, we are still going along as we are, and I'll go over that here in just a little bit. In the assessing the damage, there were about 90 people affected. 9 homes were damaged beyond repair. 32 have major damage, 24 have minor damage, and 34 were affected. And these rankings were per the FEMA estimate of FEMA standards that we'll be reporting back to FEMA. Total damage, as we estimated, a preliminary estimate is $1.2 million. City staff has certainly been involved. Police and fire have been heavily involved, as have Public Works. Wednesday or Thursday, I forget which day, pulled a trailer out of the creek in response to an emergency situation regarding anticipated storms coming that night. With it being in the creek and the heavy storms they were predicting, that trailer could have been moved again. So we got the trailer out. Also found a car a few days later on farther downstream, and the staff removed it. Our building inspectors have been on scene every day, evaluating, at least from the exterior, what the possibilities were with the structures that are there, and we've made initial assessments. And also regarding electricity too. Electricity was off to a big portion of the park, and there's probably still electricity that's not been restored to the to citizens as have gas service either. Each of those things, they're all required to pull permits, of which the city's waiving any fees associated with that. This is mainly from a safety standpoint to make sure that the electrical connection, gas, or whatever connections there is safe for that residence. There's a section of the park that has not had water service since the flood, since last Monday. It covers about 59 homes. Water was turned off to that section of the park because some of the homes were removed. The flood caused them to leave their foundation, their setup, or I'm not sure what the appropriate term is. But obviously the water system was compromised, and when the houses left, the shutoff valves went with them. So we weren't able to cut them off, and the system does belong to the association. It does not belong. It's not a city system out there. The streets belong to the mobile home park, as do the water and the sewer and whatnot. So the system was shut off, and then until such time that the system is repaired or is deemed, or that the water coming from that section of the system is deemed consumable or potable, then it'll remain off. And that's affecting 59 of the homes out in the park. We also determined, as far as reestablishing residences down there, is going to be problematic in that our codes and ordinances won't allow it. If a structure has been damaged beyond 51%, it's going to have to adhere to new codes. And with the new codes comes zoning. All the properties there are individually owned. And then there's an association to go along with it, as I mentioned before. So rezoning, all the properties are zoned M2, which is heavy industrial. The M2 zoning does not certainly support having a mobile home there. So rezoning it isn't an option because we don't have an ordinance that allows for mobile home to be put on there, because all the we have a mobile home park ordinance, but we don't have an ordinance that allows for mobile homes to come in and put on a piece of property. All the existing mobile homes were grandfathered in when they passed that ordinance some years ago. So you can't rezone it, so you leave it as an M2 zoning, so it's a non-conforming use, which you might still be able to use from some standpoint. Then it comes another portion of the codes come in, and that the property's not large enough to accommodate a house that's big enough to be put on there for a single-family structure, again, per our codes. So there's difficulties in dealing with the codes. And then from a third standpoint, our own flood control ordinance, flood prevention ordinance would not allow reestablishing it down there in the floodway, certainly in the floodway such as it is down there. So there's issues on multiple levels that would make reestablishing residences problematic, and FEMA is also supposed to be getting with us, and with a statement of if there was to be construction down there, what the standards would be, and we have yet to get that, but I imagine they would be quite onerous to each of the homeowners that are down there. So barring that, not knowing what to recommend to these folks as far as where to go, or especially how to get there, that's where we're largely relying on FEMA or some of the assistance organizations, and the Red Cross has certainly been helpful in that. I'll get to the assistance here in just a minute. As far as securing the area, as I said, the police and fire have been very instrumental in doing that. They've been very responsive, very complimentary from the aid workers that have been out there to the citizens that have been out there, very complimentary of the staff's assistance out there. They had a heightened presence last week that has since been reduced starting today. So, and being out there, I was out there this afternoon, and there's a lot of folks have seemingly left the area. I'm not saying they're not there, but it's not nearly as inhabited as what it was last week, certainly. As far as assistance, the Red Cross, Salvation Army, certainly been key to that. The Christian Center of Fort Worth has been kind of the main point for donations of items like clothing or furniture and appliances and things of that nature. And if anybody's got those type of items, they need to be directed to the Christian Center of Fort Worth. We've gotten donations from many places, anywhere from Coca-Cola donating 300 plus cases of Coke products to folks certainly donating sizable amounts of money. Got a civic organization, the Haltom Club, is donating shoes or shoe certificates. AT&T's donated phones. There's just a plethora of things that have happened as far as services. The Southern Baptist Convention Relief Team and the Southern Baptist Men of Texas were down there last week helping with relief efforts as far as cleanup and stuff, as well as the Churches of Christ Disaster Relief. And I'm not sure what the name of the group was, but there's a group that was down there yesterday giving out gift cards to the families, anywhere from $200 to $300. So those things were certainly very well appreciated, I'm sure, from the residents down there. And Cliff 570 AM also had a couple of fundraising broadcasts out at the Christian Center to help raise money for the relief efforts. So now we've got all this stuff. How do we get it out to the people that need it? And that's been kind of a challenge because with the flood, their cars went with it as well as their homes. So we're going to be trying to provide shuttles for these folks, and we're working with the Red Cross to work out distributing these items. On this Saturday, June 30th, the victims will be receiving these donated items, and the Red Cross is going to be coordinating those efforts. From health issues, there's certainly been help from the Humane Society helping with the animals and vaccinating any of the dogs that are there that have come from the park.
ISI, the city's contract trash hauler, was out there last week picking up debris and trash, and they were out there, I think, Friday, doing that, and they'll be out there again this week. But from a FEMA standpoint, we were hopeful that FEMA was going to be out there today. Hopefully that something was going to happen with that disaster declaration that the governor forwarded on to the White House, but we have not seen that as of yet, and it's not alarming. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen. These things take some time, but we are still hopeful that the FEMA, there's going to be some action there, but but at the same time we need to be prepared that there may not be. Staff is meeting with the state emergency management division on Wednesday to discuss the hazard mitigation program. The state administers those FEMA funds, but we'll be meeting with the state on Wednesday to see what can happen or what opportunities are there for that, and that's as a result of that notice of interest that we sent shortly before the flood. So we'll see what can happen there, but that's just a brief synopsis of what's happened and what's gone on since then. That's kind of up to the minute, and I'll take any questions if you guys have anything.
Have any questions for Tom?
Well, I just wanted to introduce Mr. Malcolm Jackson. He is a member of the Skyline Mobile Home Park Association Board, and he wanted some time to address the council regarding some of the flooding issues down there, if you don't mind him taking a
Mr. Jackson,
moment.
thank you.
Mr. Murr, Mr. Langford, members of the council, let me express to you, first off, that I appreciate the opportunity to be here before this esteemed body. We sometimes fail to recognize that in a free country, the freedoms that we have, and this is one of them. And so first, let me thank you for that. Second off, let me issue the condolences to the family that lost this precious child. We can only imagine what that must be like, and so we extend our condolences to them. To give you a brief history about myself, my wife had the privilege of working as a communications dispatcher for the city of Haltom City some 30 years ago, and I have 28 years of public safety history, police, fire, EMS service, and I also am a resident of the park with some 20-plus years in the park. My wife lost her home and all of her belongings in the early 80s when the floods occurred on the deep south end. She went through the processes of receiving the FEMA funds and SBA funds and a low-interest loan, and so we are intimately familiar with both sides, and in fact all of the assets and the tangents and the issues that surround these losses, both from the government's perspective as well as those of the emergency service workers and those of the residents. So we speak with some degree of knowledge and history behind that. But specifically, we have been asked by the Skyline Board, I'm a former member there, to speak to this body and to the community to let them know just how much we appreciate the efforts of this community, both this city council, this city staff, and especially the police and fire services. They have done an outstanding job, a remarkable job of assisting the citizens down there. And notwithstanding all of the support that we have received from the many community volunteers and organizations, I've been asked to speak on behalf of the park to express our appreciation and to thank you and them for our efforts. And then to reassure everyone in this community that we absolutely support working in a collaborative effort with this city to do whatever we can to make whatever transitions need to be made so that it's in the best interest of the citizens, the best interest of the park owners, and the best interest of the community at large, and not to put our fire personnel and our police personnel in jeopardy in the future if we can avoid that. And with that, I just say thank you for a job well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
If I can add something, Mayor, and Mr. Jackson, I've failed to mention the board, but the board has been very good to work with, especially during this time. it's a very difficult situation when you're dealing with certainly a loss of life and property out there. That's words can't describe it. In the pre-council, there was some concern about some of the media reports about how there's a perception that there's just been a lot of effort and a lot of work put towards trying to remove these folks or trying to mitigate some of the issues with the problem and whether there's a lot, that's kind of a subjective term, but there's been several things that have been done, and I'll just, if I can, just take a minute to clear that up. Can I do that without violating open meetings on this thing, or?
I think you're still on.
Okay, all right. What the city, what kind of started this is the city kind of, in response to the March floods, the city issued a notice of interest 10 days ago to the State Emergency Management Division, which administers the hazard mitigation funds. In that notice of interest, we were expressing an interest in participating in the hazard mitigation program, specifically for the Skyline Mobile Home Park, and helping those residents get out of that area. And this was in response to a presidential order that was given regarding some storms that happened over a specific time period, of which the March storms did not occur during that time period. But we sent it in just on a hope, a whim, or just a what if, just trying to do something to get some notice, get some help with this thing. And that's really all we did, was just send a notice of interest that explained some of the issues. Now, prior to that, there's certainly the Big Fossil Consortium study that this council has heard several times, and most recently several months ago from the COG, that the COG and the Corps of Engineers is heading up, and that has taken in the process of a number of years, and probably still has time to go, but it covers many communities and many miles for that creek and the contributing creek system for that study to be completed. There's certainly a lot of effort that goes into that. There was certainly effort done in the late 90s for the city and the owners up there to try and do something along those lines, and it just didn't, for whatever reason, just didn't work out. And so we've been kind of going along as best we can. Certainly the staff's been managing it, and the residents down there have been managing it as well as we can, given the circumstances that have been there. But it's been an ongoing problem. But since the floods in March, the staff has been trying to do something to get some help down there. And certainly since that flood, we had a tornado that we've had to turn our attention to do some things with. So we're seeing what can happen, but in doing something with these properties up there, it's going to take a considerable amount of money, which is what I believe is beyond the city's ability to do at this time. We need help to do that, and I don't think it's just this city. I think most any city is going to be beyond their ability to do it. That's what FEMA's there for. That's what the hazard mitigation program's up there for. It's to provide that help. It's not the expectation that just because it's Haltom City we can't do it. I don't think any other city would be able to do it either. But it's going to take. We're talking about, well, there's 250 properties in the park. Do you take, which ones do you identify and take? And we initially identified some, even when we first did this, when we first approached this thing a couple of months ago, trying to participate in something like this, we only identified maybe 30 properties in that thing. Perry, when this thing first came around, it was 30. So even if we did that, this thing affected a much more than that. This was, what we experienced last week was effectively a 100-year flood that took out a good third to a half of the park, or affected a third to a half of the park. They didn't take it out, but affected it in some way, shape, or form. So, and then if you take out some of those things, then you've got the condo association, or the mobile home park association, which by law has to have X number of lots to exist, and then affecting that is problematic from a legal standpoint. So there's many, many facets to deal with, and this is kind of probably what they were dealing with back in the late 90s that proved to be a huge hurdle to get around, and I don't know why why things went like they did, but they didn't go anywhere. And so we're stuck with the situation that we are in now. Just citizens probably, citizens of the park certainly know how the process works when it goes up there. But every time there's I wouldn't say any rain event, but any significant rain event, and we have several a year. Fire personnel goes up to the park and monitors that creek. If the creek gets to a particular level, after not just looking at the creek, but as they're certainly looking at the radar, looking at the reports, looking at all sorts of different information that they're extrapolating from the Weather Service or whatnot, they're making a decision whether it's time, at what point, if any, do we start evacuating residents. And then if they start evacuating them, they can't force residents to leave. Sometimes they don't. Or when they do finally decide to leave, well, it's too late. Then we got to launch boats to get them out of there. So it's problematic for everybody. And it gets to be cumbersome and certainly not safe for the residents who are there, but it's what's been going on for years. And I'm not saying it's right, but that's just what's happened. Unfortunately, Monday, the floods came very, very quickly, and a little girl died. It's sad. It's very, very sad. A loss of life, loss of property like that, it's not needed, and the staff will probably escalate efforts trying to do something, and certainly the people down there, they need some direction and some help, and we're not real sure what to tell them there. We're looking for some help, and we'll keep dealing with that, but that's about all I've got to report on. But again, if you have any more questions about that, I'll certainly address them.
Any questions for Tom? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. I happen to note that Tom, on top of his 16-hour days last week, was out bright and early Saturday morning down at the Christian Center sorting out clothes and pitching in, and so was Richard. And I know there was a number of other folks who had been putting in long hours and days, and we're out there helping, and we appreciate those volunteers. The next on the agenda is the monthly financial report for May. Joel Welch.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. Of course, enclosed in your agenda packet was the monthly council report for the fiscal year through May 31st, 2007. And as is customary, I shall try to keep my comments brief. Of course, we're at the 2/3 mark of the fiscal year. And it's as we get closer and closer to the end of the fiscal year, some trends become a little more clear and apparent, and some of the places where I can begin to paint a little better picture of where we're headed is also possible now. I'll stick, of course, to the high points. Property taxes are still pretty much on track, and it looks like that they will get very close to our budget targets. We're kind of working some numbers around. It still depends upon how the ultimate outcome is determined upon the situation with the Barrington Apartments, whether those payments are actually property taxes or a payment in lieu of taxes. But that is a matter to be determined at the appraisal board. So we'll find out on that. But that's why sometimes my estimate on the property taxes varies a little bit. But sales taxes, of course, this is a matter for the general fund, the street reconstruction fund, the CCPD, EDC. I am cautiously optimistic when it comes to our sales tax. A few months ago, my model was indicating that sales tax growth was going to be close to a very low 2.12% range, and over the last 3 months it has been climbing steadily. My model indicates that we may go this year about 2.8% ahead of last year. 2.8% ahead of last year's total will cause us to slightly exceed the budget targets for the year, which is another piece of good news. Another piece of good news in the general fund is that the collections of fines and forfeitures, primarily that of the municipal court, continues to run well ahead of expectations and has contributed greatly to the fairly strong position the general fund's in for this fiscal year. On the expenditure side, the general fund is in pretty solid shape. The departments are staying within their budgets for the most part. There's a few small matters, most of which the council is aware of, that I'm intending to bring next month at the first council meeting in July in the form of a budget amendment request to cover some things such as the special study that the council approved earlier for the personnel classification and the market salary study. And then, there's been some other things, grants and such things, that I'll be bringing as a budget amendment for the council to consider at the first meeting in July. But at this point, like I said, the operating departments are staying within their specified targets for the most part, or very close. And I don't see any areas of concern at the 2/3 mark, which means that the general fund is in a pretty solid position going into the last few months of the fiscal year. The water and sewer fund, on the expenditure side, we are being as careful as we can. On the revenue side, water sales just are lagging greatly behind the budget target. They're lagging greatly behind last year. If you notice in the text, I talked about some rainfall totals, where we were in terms of rainfall last year versus this year versus average. And we are way above last year's pace, and we're still solidly above the average, and it is manifesting itself in water sales as well as water purchases being about 8% behind. And should this pattern continue, we can fiscally finish the year in the water and sewer fund in a pretty close to break-even point if we watch our spending the rest of the year. And we will be keeping a close eye on spending and trying not to do, I'm going to be encouraging non-essential expenditures for the rest of the year in the water and sewer fund, just to bring us into a good break-even pattern. I think a soft landing is possible just due to the fact that because we're not selling as much water, we're not buying as much water. So we do have some savings on the expense side of the budget as well. The drainage utility fund, revenues, of course, are very fixed in that fund. Expenses for the year are below budget, and they've been trending below budget, and I think that that's going to be a factor in favor of the drainage utility finishing the year in a pretty decent shape, overall. Of course, street reconstruction, economic development funds are driven completely by the sales tax. The sales tax situation is helping them. Street reconstruction fund, of course, is full of projects, and we are doing projects as fast as flow of funds will allow us to do it. And you've seen, I think, a market impact in the community, even with this year's projects as well as the past few years. The Economic Development Fund is in a very, very good shape. As I said, revenues are slightly exceeding budget. The expenses so far this year are beneath what we expected them to be at this point, and we kind of expect them to probably stay beneath expectations for the balance of the year. As far as the investment report goes, as I had mentioned earlier, over the last couple of months, we have finally caught and passed our benchmark, and we are now above our benchmark. I did promise we would get there eventually. We are now fairly solidly above. Our benchmark is 4.8% now, and we are at about 5.08%, so we're in pretty good shape there. There is one thing that has changed in our portfolio and how we're doing our investing. One of our investment pools that we've invested with for a while, we call it Texas Term, has a laddering fixed investment that kind of works like a CD. It's kind of like a CD, and you can ladder your money out for a fixed guaranteed rate for up to a year, month by month. And what we're doing is we're taking our capital project money, trying to time it with our expenditures for our projects, but we're taking that money out and we're breaking it out across a year. And so in the past few months, when we first started doing this, we were still reporting that money as pool money, as overnight money. And that's not accurate. So starting this month, I'm now reporting to you that money as a fixed investment, and I'm classifying it as a fixed investment and talking about its earnings like a fixed investment, like our CDs and like our agencies. So if you notice, there'd been kind of a flip-flop where I used to say we were 40%, 60% liquid and 40% time invested. Now it says we're about the other way, about 60-40 the other way. It's because we have those laddered investments. And what that does is that provides us with a little protection from any volatility in the market. And the market is somewhat volatile right now. It's volatile within a fairly narrow range right now. I think it's kind of trying to find a level. And there's nothing out there that causes it to move very much one way or the other. So what it does is it just moves one way or the other very rapidly in a narrow range. So it's a very dynamic, fluid situation in our investment market right now. But our portfolio, like I said, is above 5% now on the weighted average maturity. And our weighted average yield is up to 150 days, which oddly enough is still below our benchmark target, which is 180 days. But yet we're beating that 180-day rate. So the portfolio is in pretty good shape at this point.
Thank you, Joel. Any questions? Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Joel, during the tornado and the flood situation, did we have to dip into overtime funds, or were we able to meet the disasters with shift personnel that were available during those time frames?
We have not dipped into any reserves at this writing to make those expenditures. I won't say that something else coming down the pike might not make us actually do that, but at this point we've been able to more or less handle that in operations right now.
Thanks, sir.
There will probably be something along in the lines of the budget amendment that's going to be taking care of some of that, though. It's going to have to come out of that. We haven't dipped into it yet just because we don't have the mechanism to do it, but we're going to be doing it that way. Nor do we expect to be reimbursed from the first flood or the tornado. It did not meet the criteria to receive any disaster assistance for that stuff, so it's all on our nickel.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Hutchison?
Yeah, and following on with that point right there, I'm glad our investments are good, but the 60-40, the other, is that going to present cash flow problems in paying for overtime in case we have to come back and take care of that sometime later on?
No, sir. Our the approximately 35 to 40% of overnight available cash is between $10 and $12 million. So we have sufficient liquidity.
Takes care of my overtime. Yeah. Any questions for Joel? Any other questions? I've asked, thank you, Joel. I've asked city manager to address some specific issues around the drainage fund and how that's used. There have been a number of questions from citizens this past week relating to that and the overflow or the flooding of White Creek. So, Tom, will you give us a kind of a broad view of what we're doing with the drainage funds there?
Well, the drainage funds certainly cover the creeks as what would and the maintenance thereof. Certainly, White's Branch Creek would have qualified for that, but it also takes care of. It's supposed to include all the other creeks, ditches, streets, curbs, and gutters throughout the entire city, and we've been using those funds to deal with that. We've had several heavy rain events that the drainage fund has made an impact on, and that there has not been a loss of property or certainly a loss of life, but as significant loss of property is what there's been in the past. This specific creek in our stormwater master plan, which was approved last year by this council, specifically addresses White's Creek, and that the maintenance of the creek is not a problem. The creek is not normally maintained, on a regular basis, where we got staff in there cutting it, mowing it, and stuff like that, like we do with a lot of the other creeks. But that's their recommendation, is to leave it alone, because the issues therein that affecting the park are not the creek, inherently the creek. It's the people being on that low-lying area. When the park got there 30 years ago, there were not as nearly as many paved surfaces as there are now, especially upstream. I'm sure Watauga wasn't nearly as developed, nor was Keller or Fort Worth or anything like that. So there's a lot more ground, a lot more earth to soak up the water. The more development you've got, the water's got to go somewhere. And it's going downstream. For that event last Sunday, in a 24-hour period of that flood last Sunday to Monday, Sunday night, Monday morning, the city in and of itself in that area only got 2.66 inches of rain. That does not warrant that type of flooding, nor, despite the fact that it's in such a low-lying area. It's the rainfall to the north and coming down. That's a big part of the problem. And unfortunately, we don't control development outside of our own city limits, or dealing with that. So, but as far as the drainage fund, we could, could the creek be fixed to where those people could keep their homes? Yeah, if there's enough money to do it. But it's the more cost-effective and probably the quicker way to do it is to relocate them. That it would be extremely costly. It'd be extremely costly. It costs $2 to $5 million just to relocate them, buy them out, relocate them. It would cost considerably more than that to come up with a diversion for that water to do that. And it's something the Drainage Utility Fund is in no position to do at any time, to even come up with anything like that, either to buy them out or to come up with a solution for that.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Yeah, Mr. Sutton, you have a question?
I'm ready to make a motion on the monthly report if you're ready for it.
Okay.
Move to approve the monthly financial report for May 31, 2007.
Mr. Cabano.
That's for second, Mayor.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the monthly financial report for May. Is there any discussion? Please register your vote. Whoops. Okay. It is unanimous. Next is consent agenda. Consent agenda is considered to be self-explanatory and will be enacted by the council with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of those items. Approval of the consent agenda authorizes the city manager to implement each item in accordance with staff or board recommendations. I believe we have, there was some talk about removing one of these from the consent agenda. Is that anyone going to recommend that? Ms. Reese.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to remove item number 3, the wireless broadband network. I think we're in need of, desperately in need of more information to make sure we make an effective
We'll take
decision.
item 3 off of the consent agenda then. So the consent agenda will just be one item. It would be the minutes, item 2. Do I have a motion to dispose? Mr. Sutton.
Move to approve the consent agenda, which comprises of agenda item number 2, the minutes.
Mr. Hutchinson.
That's a second.
What did she do? Was that not a motion on her part?
Well, yeah, but it wasn't. She said it was a motion, but it's not necessary. It was just a request. It was just a request to move that off of.
I'm sorry.
That's the way I took it. Is that correct, Wayne? Yeah. Okay. All right. Discussion. Okay. No further discussion. So it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Consent agenda consists of item 2, the minutes. Any further discussion? Please register your vote. And that is unanimous. Under the regular agenda, we'll have the item 3, wireless broadband Wi-Fi network, consideration interaction approving work order number 2 to Chevron Energy Systems Master Agreement. Tom, you going to present this, or who's going to?
You want to take a stab at it? You want me to do it? I'll let you do it.
Okay. Mr. Welch, tell us about the Wi-Fi agreement.
Thank you, Mayor. Enclosed in your agenda was a staff memorandum concerning the work order 2 to the master agreement with Chevron. The staff, on the basis of receiving some information from council, from our city attorney, I should say, not council SEL rather than CIL, on the advice of council, has asked that the council would consider tabling this item for the working out of some language that needs to be reviewed and clarified, and that we can bring the item back at a later date if we can get this worked out.
Any questions or discussion for Joel? Seeing none, we'll. Excuse me. Too bad. Oh, okay. Councilmember Bransom. Recognize Councilmember Bransom.
I was going to make a motion when you were ready for it, if my light had worked,
Okay, what motion would you like to make?
that we table item number 3 for further information.
Okay, do we have a second? Mr. Holcomb.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to table item number 3. Any further discussion? Please register your vote. And that is unanimous to table item 3. Next on the agenda is the Visitors Citizens Forum. This time is set aside for any person having business before the council that is not scheduled on the agenda to speak to the council. All comments must be directed toward the presiding officer rather than to an individual council member or staff. Each speaker must limit his or her comments to the subject matter listed on the speaker's request form and must refrain from personal attacks toward any individual. Council cannot discuss or debate any issue brought forth at this time, nor can any formal action be taken, as it is not a posted agenda item in accordance with the Open Meetings Law. Speaking tonight, we have Mr. John Schleter wanting to talk about the Skyline flood control. Mr. Schleter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a longtime resident of the area and also a member of the Mid-Cities Democratic Political Action Committee, and like to address you today. In a recent local news report, the North Central Texas Council of Governments was quoted saying that they were working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineering to complete a study of flood control for the Skyline Park and surrounding areas. The council further commented that the reason it had not been completed yet was because the Army is busy, quote, with the war in Iraq and fighting terrorism. The disturbing thing about this comment is it is exactly the same excuse used in the New Orleans tragedy. Why is it that every time a government official is confronted with a failure these days, we are all told to pull out our Karl Rove playbooks, turn to page 911, and sing a chorus of Blame It on Iraq? I would like to strongly urge all elected politicians to immediately stop blaming policy and planning failures on 9/11 terrorism in Iraq. That being said, I'm here today as a longtime resident of the area and have seen the dizzying pace of development surrounding Skyline Mobile Home Park. No doubt when the city approved the development and the city issued the building permits and the city provided services to the development, that Skyline initially was a very safe place to live. Now that the drainage system is surrounded by concrete and tract housing, which the cities around here also approved, the flooding problems have worsened. Skyline residents deserve no less than the middle to lower income homeowners in southern Watauga, who not too long ago had dozens of 30-year-old homes reclaimed from a floodplain area with a massive paved drainage system stretching for miles. Skyline residents are also land and homeowners who deserve no less. The two viable and fair options for these residents should be either to do the job, which should have been done a long time ago, and improve the flood control for the area, or as a last resort, and with the consent of all residents of Haltom City, pay them a fair and equitable amount to begin a new life elsewhere. I do realize, of course, that many plans and arrangements are underway by city and state officials. However, we can also realize that plans and arrangements have been underway for many, many years already. We may not be experts in city planning, zoning, and flood control, but some of us are getting pretty good at electing government officials who will work for the best interest of the working class and can get the job done in a timely manner. I urge the entire City Council to resolve to making the welfare of these victims a top priority, and I will also promise all of you today that the Haltom City is a top priority for us. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Anyone else like to speak? Visitors Forum? Citizens Forum, excuse me. Seeing none, I will close this part of the agenda. Move on to the next boards and commissions. Item 4, resignation of board members. Do we have any resignations? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 5, appointment and reappointment to boards and commissions. Ms. Branson?
Thank you, Mayor. I have an appointment to the Zoning Board of Adjustments, Angela Daragowski.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Please register your vote to confirm. And that is unanimous. Any other appointments? Okay, I've got some, if you'll give me just a half second to... Okay, I've got a number of appointments here. I'll just take them through here, one group at a time. Renominating for the Animal Control Board, the 2 citizen members currently there, Marie Elaine Moore and Nancy Watkins to the Animal Control Board. Any discussion? Please register your vote. Confirm. And that is unanimous. Next, on the ZBA, I have a reappointment, Beth Thompson, to the as an alternate to the ZBA. Any discussion? Please register your vote. And that is unanimous. To the Economic Development Corporation. Madam Secretary, am I to understand all of these are to be reappointed? Okay. Reappoint Councilman Sutton, Councilman Bransom, myself, Chairman Lewis, Dan Lewis, and Jack Lucko to the Economic Development Corporation. Is there any discussion? Please register your vote to confirm. And that is unanimous. And to the Beautification Board, I am renominating C.C. Oaks for place 8. Any discussion? Please register your vote to confirm. And that is unanimous. I thank you for that, for your patience. There are no unexcused absences to report. We will now, let's meet in executive session at 8 p.m. We will meet in executive session at 8 p.m. Under items as authorized by section 551-071, -072, and -074. Thank you.
You want me to give this to Diane?